Hello everyone, this is Dr. Nicola Duchamp, the Naturopathic Mama. How are you? And welcome to our three-part Facebook Live series on Candida overgrowth. And we put this together because we are celebrating the launch of a new course that we developed. It's myself in conjunction with my fellow naturopath, Julia Britz, and it's called the Candida Solution. And we really felt like there was such a need. There are so many people that struggle with Candida overgrowth, and there's such a hodgepodge of information out there. And so the Candida Solution is kind of geared to solve some of those questions and kind of point people in the right direction. So before I get started, I just going to give you a little bit of the lay of the land over the next 3 days. These are just going to be short mini videos. But I do definitely want to give you value and give you information that you can utilize and learn from. So today we're going to talk about diet and Candida overgrowth, the Candida diets. Is that enough? Is that the right thing to do? We'll just touch on that. Tomorrow I'm going to go a little bit more in depth into the other things that we need to look for. Candida overgrowth does not happen in isolation. And so often there are other things going on in the digestive system, and certainly other things going on systemically that can predispose an individual to Candida overgrowth. And so tomorrow I'm going to talk about some of those things like leaky gut and parasites and food sensitivities and gluten intolerance and all that good stuff. And then on Thursday, I'm going to talk a bit about Candida in children. And those kinds of issues can start from infancy. And so it's just good to be aware of how Candida can develop in children and how it can manifest in children as well. So before we jump in today, just a note of introduction for those of you who may not know me. My name is Dr. Nicola Duchamp, the Naturopathic Mama, and I'm a naturopathic doctor who has a private practice in San Diego, California called Restore Medicine. And I have for the last 15, 16, 17 years now, losing count, been working very closely with individuals with digestive issues, with individuals who are struggling with chronic infections like Lyme disease and co-infections of Lyme, and also with children who may have developmental delay, behavioral issues, ADHD, autism spectrum, a whole range of different things. And so those kind of years of experience have culminated in my releasing a couple of educational programs. I do have another course called Lyme Ed that covers everything I know about Lyme disease. And now I'm excited to release the Candida Solution. So without further ado, let's just jump into this. So if you are not even sure if Candida overgrowth is relevant for you, if that's even something that you need to worry about, I would invite you to take our questionnaire. It's completely free. We'll put a link in the comments. And it's just a simple questionnaire that will help you to identify, is this a concern for you or not? If it is a concern, is it a little concern? Is it a major concern? And so that's a good starting point just to kind of get yourself familiar with some of the issues around Candida and what can lead up to problems with Candida. So the $1 million question is the Candida diet all by itself enough to overcome Candida overgrowth? And I would actually answer yes, potentially. And I personally believe that when we have problems with Candida, we need to attack it more holistically. And I also am a very firm believer that it's not necessary to make oneself miserable for lengthy periods of time, eating 3 different foods, and that being the only treatment for the Candida overgrowth. Right? So this is what I talk about in the course, and this is what I want to talk about today. I have known people, I've known friends of mine to do it, I've had patients who've done it, who have put themselves on such a restrictive diet for months, even a year at a time, in their effort to combat Candida overgrowth. And while diet is important, and I'll talk about that in a minute, it's my opinion that we have so many great other tools that can help us get the results faster and not have to drive ourselves absolutely bonkers with these diets that are so restrictive and so drawn out. Okay, so, I mean, if you picture going 12 months saying, I'm going to starve out this Candida overgrowth, I'm going to starve out this Candida, 12 months or more eating like 0 carbs, 0 fruit, that's all good and well. And there are times where those restrictions are definitely necessary. And I do feel like some dietary modification is important in all Candida situations. So don't get me wrong, I'm not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. But I just don't feel like that's the only thing people should do, okay? I think we should utilize the tools that we have, whether they be herbs, whether they be other antifungal substances like colloidal silver, for example, or indeed, even in some cases, medications. And I'm not opposed to antifungal medications either. And so I teach about both of those things, the natural elements and the more prescriptive elements, because I'm very big on integrative medicine. And so I think we want to use the least invasive tools necessary to get the job done. But if that's not getting the job done, then we step it up and we do what we have to do to get the job done, okay? We do it in a safe way, we do it in a controlled fashion, but there are some times where going to a prescription antifungal is the right choice. And I think that it's important that we take away the sort of stigma about, oh, I don't want to do any prescriptions at all, because sometimes they're very, very safe and they don't even get absorbed into the bloodstream. They just help with the yeast in the gut and get excreted again. So I, by far in my practice, I do a lot of herbal medicines and herbal antifungals to help with Candida overgrowth. And I feel like a combination of the nutritional approach plus the antifungals is the way to go. But I also feel, and we'll touch on this tomorrow, that we do also have to get to the underlying cause of the overgrowth, right? Why did it happen? Is it that somebody had too many courses of antibiotics? Well, that's understandable. That's something that happens. Is it that their diet was so poor they were eating tons of sugar and processed foods? Well, okay, if that's the case, then we have some retraining and some lifestyle choices and shifts to make. Or is it that there's something else going on in the gut that throws everything out of balance and then kind of predisposes to Candida? Or something else going on in the body, like toxicity or like mycotoxins. We're seeing a lot now of this mycotoxin illness where people may have been in a water damaged building, had exposure to mold, and now they're very unwell and they've got all kinds of fungal things going on in their body. So there's a lot more to it that I believe is important. Digging a little bit deeper and seeing how the problem got there in the first place is really the way to overcome it long term. So let's just talk about the diet for a little bit. So I do believe that nutritional modifications are necessary and important in eradicating Candida overgrowth or getting Candida overgrowth under control. So the primary thing we want to consider is sugars and carbohydrates, because yeast feeds off sugar. And so the number one thing we want to eradicate from the diet is processed, refined sugars, your cakes, your cookies, your ice cream, all of those kinds of things. Now, my hope would be that element can be a longer term modification, right? Because there's so many different reasons to get those kinds of foods out of your diet. But in the beginning, that can be really hard for a couple of different reasons. So yeast feeds off sugar, right? It loves sugar. It needs sugar. So what happens? It has you craving sugar because it's crying out for its food. And you imagine lots of little yeasties in your gut going, feed me, I want sugar. And then you get these amazing cravings and you just feel like you're out of control and you're eating just fruity and sugary stuff all day long. And that's part of the cycle that needs to be broken in the beginning. And again, I feel like this is where herbs can help us. And sometimes we also pull in natural things to help regulate blood sugar as well as dampening the yeast so that we help break that sugary cycle. And things I love for blood sugar, chromium would be one. It's a mineral. Cinnamon bark is amazing for insulin sensitivity. And like gymnema, there's a lot of different helpers for the blood sugar part. But I have found that once we bring in antifungals and start knocking that Candida level down, people usually have an easier time with the sugar cravings. So no question, it can be hard in the beginning, but the more you can do to counter the yeast, the easier it will be to get off the sugar. And then once that cycle is broken, then, it's easier to maintain. It's just, you've got to break that cycle. And so for that reason, it often is important to have like a month or so with, with more strict avoidance of sugars and carbohydrates. Right, so I mentioned the sugars that just come to the top of our head most easily are sort of junky sugars, ice cream, cookies, candy, cake, all of those kinds of things. But there are other forms of sugar. So fruit is a form of sugar. It's fructose, it's not sucrose. So it's a different type of sugar. It bounces your blood sugar around less. And in an individual who's not struggling with Candida, having fruit looks like a good thing. It's full of vitamins and minerals. It's got some soluble fiber. Fruit is good for you. And it's found in nature. It's not a processed food. However, people who are really struggling with Candida do still need to watch their fruit intake. And so this does mean total avoidance in some people. Typically for me, that's more like a month or two. It's not more like a year, which is the point I was going back to at the beginning. Because if we do it right and we're using other tools to treat Candida overgrowth along with diet, it doesn't need to be so drawn out and so horrible. So definitely, and some fruits are better than others, like blueberries or berries in general are going to be a lot less sugary than something like a mango or a banana. And so again, we can sort of qualify the different things that we're eating. Pears are not so bad. Apples are sort of not so bad, medium, but not so bad. But mangoes and bananas, any dried fruit, whatever is out because that's packed with sugar. That's just concentrated sugar. And it's so easy to overeat dried fruit because it tastes so good and it just seems like, little raisins. Well, they're not very big. I can have a bunch of them. And then all of a sudden you've got this huge sugar intake. So we do need to be aware of our fruit sugars as well. But for me, there's a little bit more wiggle room there, like maybe having a half a cup of berries in a smoothie in the morning is okay, but just not having multiple pieces of fruit day in, day out. Then the other category, of course, is our more complex carbohydrates, things like rice and pasta and, more of our grains, potatoes. So what's interesting and important to be aware of is that complex carbs also break down to sugars. All carbohydrates at the end of the day become sugars. We think of them differently because, they are more starchy, they are more complex, not just the simple sugars that break down very easily. However, the net result is the same. And so again, there are some times when we do a carbohydrate, a great total grain avoidance, okay? Couple of months, a month perhaps, just to break that cycle and give us a kickstart. But again, I'm not one on staying off all complex carbs for a year at a time. Some people do that and feel a lot better. That's a whole different thing. But what I'm talking about is the people who are sort of white knuckling through each day doing these massively restricted diets. Because one thing that I get concerned with in that, going off topic just for a little bit, is I have seen that set people up for terrible rebound eating. And just knowing the psyche and how our bodies are set up for our survival, right? So if we restrict food too severely, and this is, you see this all the time with eating disorders, with anorexia, bulimia especially, restrict, then firstly, that'll slow down our metabolism, but also it kind of sets people up for this sort of rebound, falling completely off the wagon, right? So I'd rather find a moderate path that we can stay with long term, that makes sense and promotes health, rather than something really extreme that's just not sustainable. Because we're looking for lifestyle changes. We're looking for changes and improvements for life. So back onto our complex carbohydrates. One thing I'm big on, though, is getting gluten out of the diet. And I'll probably talk tomorrow about some different ways to test for gluten intolerance. But whether one is actually gluten intolerant on lab testing, it is just such a good thing you can do for your body to get gluten off the menu. It's very inflammatory, and it produces something called zonulin, which can lead to leaky gut. I'll talk about this tomorrow, so I won't go into it too much today. But being gluten-free, I believe, is one of the most important choices you can make for your health. And so I very, very rarely meet someone that goes gluten-free and doesn't feel somehow better for it. So gluten, I believe, is a good one to take out, because if it is causing inflammation in the gut, that then predisposes us to Candida. Because anything that causes an imbalance in the gut allows Candida to grow. So gluten-free is one thing. I just am not a big believer that we have to have all grains out of the diet. Things like quinoa, things like sweet potatoes, which are much lower glycemic index than regular potatoes, things like brown rice, at least can be taken on a rotation basis. The other thing I'm big on, and my Lyme patients know this because we talk a lot about it, is I'm big on promoting a health plan that allows one to have enjoyment in life, right? I don't want anyone sitting at home for 12 months, not going on a dinner date or hanging out with friends because there's nothing they can eat because they're busy treating Candida. Now, understanding some people have massive sensitivities and they go to a restaurant and it's just impossible to find something they can eat, or they just need it prepared a very special way. I mean, I understand there are those cases. But again, I've had friends of mine do that. I'm on this Candida diet. I can't, I'm not eating out for 6 months or something like that. And then they feel isolated and they feel alone. Whereas if they took a more comprehensive approach to the issue, I think they could get away with a little bit more. So a couple of just little examples here in the food department. So there's also things that promote yeast, like vinegars, for example. People with bad yeast Candida issues probably shouldn't have too much in the vinegar family. However, apple cider vinegar is unique, and apple cider vinegar can really be helpful in overcoming Candida overgrowth. The other thing is alcohol. Again, alcohol's not going to be great for Candida, and it's high in sugar, and beer has gluten and yeast and all of that. But if you are going to go out and choose to enjoy a glass of alcohol, then make it a vodka and soda or something like that. Again, just trying to be moderate, trying to be a little bit more balanced in our approach of not being like, oh, I can't have any of that for a year. Finding ways to adapt and adjust so that you can maintain a lifestyle that you enjoy and that works for you. So we talked about fruit, we talked about complex carbohydrates. So really the ideal foods to choose are your lean proteins. And I also get asked about legumes. I tend to feel for vegetarians, like keeping those legumes in is probably a good source of protein. For people who do eat fish and poultry and meat, the ideal diet really is a diet that's high in good, healthy, lean proteins, organic, wild-caught fish, organic, grass-fed meat, organic poultry. That's really important, because otherwise all you're getting is a ton of hormones and antibiotics and pesticides and all this other stuff that comes through the animal. And also just for humane reasons too, that they've had a life where they've wandered around and been free. I think that's important. And so, the lean proteins, lots of green leafies so that you're getting that fiber, you're getting the roughage, you're getting lots of vitamins and minerals from vegetables, but you're tending towards ones that are, less starchy. And then lots and lots of healthy fats. So coconut oil for cooking is amazing because it keeps its structure at high temperatures. Whereas olive oil, as much as I love it for raw, like salad dressings and just drizzled over things, olive oil will get rancid at higher temperatures. So coconut oil is also awesome. Coconut oil is also a source of caprylic acid, which has antifungal properties, right? So perfect. So healthy fats, lean proteins, nuts and seeds are fine. Some people do better soaking them just to break them down so they're easier to digest. You want to keep your fiber up because you want to be making sure your bowels are moving and you're sweeping things through the bowels, especially if you are doing antifungal treatments and you're killing off yeast. You want to make sure you're getting that out. And yeah, healthy fats, lean proteins, lots of green leafies, minimal fruit, but for most people, a little bit here and there is good. So let me see, what else did I want to tell you? Oh, just a quick tip. I'm a big fan of smoothies in the morning, and you can also get fermented superfood powder that can be really, really helpful in, again, balancing the gut flora. So it's not just about what you're not eating, it's about what you're putting into your body. Same goes for fermented foods like kimchi and kefir and things like that. They can help to put good flora into your body. So if you can incorporate those into your diet, then you're just giving yourself an extra helping hand. So I think the lesson or the message that I would like for you to take home is that you don't have to drive yourself crazy to get over Candida overgrowth. You don't have to drive yourself nuts with the diet. You don't have to sit at home and and not have a social life for a year. I mean, there are different ways to go about it. And I'm all about bringing on board the herbs, bringing on board, the probiotics, and really kind of getting yourself on a comprehensive program, investigating the underlying factors that led to the overgrowth in the first place, because that will prevent it happening again. It's not just about, starving yourself on 3 foods for a year and then going back to exactly what you did before, because there was something that got you there in the first place. And so either you need to take a really good look at your diet, maybe work with a nutritionist or a naturopath to guide you with that. And I'll talk a little bit tomorrow about different tests that I love to do to kind of figure out gut health and things. But just it's a whole body, whole life thing. It's not just rigid diet, and then you'll be good forever after, right? So there is so much more you can do, and I'm excited to share more information with you. So stay tuned, same time tomorrow, 12 noon, on the Naturopathic Mama page, and I will see you then.